You know, there are moments in life that don't just tap you on the shoulder. They hit you in the chest so hard you forget how to breathe. They don't ask permission, they don't knock politely, they don't give you a warning, they just arrive. And suddenly, the world you thought you understood feels unfamiliar, like somebody moved all the walls inside your heart. And recently, I had one of those moments. It happened on an ordinary day, the kind of day you expect nothing profound from. The air was still, the light was soft, and I was moving through my routine like a man on autopilot. But then I heard a story, a simple, quiet story about death told through the lens of Islam. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't prepared for what it did to me. I've lived long enough to hear thousands of stories, some sad, some beautiful, some that cling to you for a few hours, then fade. But this one didn't fade. It wrapped its hands around my soul and held on. And as I listened, my eyes watered, my chest tightened, and something in me cracked open in a way I didn't even know was possible. Because it wasn't really a story about loss. It was a story about returning. And when it ended, I just sat there, staring at nothing, drowning in a question I had never dared to ask myself. Have I misunderstood what death really is? All my life, I believed death was a final chapter, a heavy door slamming shut, a silence that swallows everything, a last breath that ends the story. But something in that story, something in the way it unfolded, made me question everything I thought I knew. I remember whispering to myself, almost scared to hear the sound of my own voice, is there more? And that quiet question, that crack in the concrete of my certainty, is what pushed me to look deeper, to listen harder, to allow myself to understand why this one Islamic teaching had shaken me to the core. The story was about a man grieving someone he loved deeply. He was drowning in pain, trying to breathe through the weight of loss. And in the middle of his heartbreak, he went to a scholar and asked, "How do I live with this pain?" And the scholar answered with a sentence I had never heard before. Death is not the end. Death is a return. A return. That one word felt like a velvet hammer, soft, gentle, comforting, yet powerful enough to break down walls inside me that had been standing for years. Because in Islam, they believe every soul comes from God, lives its temporary story here, and one day returns to God. Not lost, not erased, not forgotten. Returned. The scholar told him, when you cry for someone who passed, you're not crying because they disappeared. You're crying because you're still here while they went back home. And I swear, when I heard that, something in me collapsed, because suddenly death wasn't this dark hallway I'd been afraid of all my life. It was something gentler, something dignified, a kind of homecoming more than a disappearance. It wasn't an ending, it was a transition, a reunion. And that idea shook me. It humbled me. It softened something I didn't know needed softening. As I sat with it, I realized how much of my life I'd spent trying to outrun the thought of death. Like if I stayed busy enough, loud enough, accomplished enough, I could pretend the finish line wasn't there. But what if the finish line isn't a fall, but a return to where you started? What if the moment we fear the most is actually the moment we're met with mercy? And slowly, questions I'd buried for years rose to the surface. What am I doing with the limited time I have? Who am I becoming every day? What kind of soul am I shaping in the quiet moments when nobody's watching? Because if life is temporary and death is a return, then this world, everything we stress about, everything we fight over, everything we chase is just the waiting room before the real home. I thought about every grudge I held like a tight fist. Every moment I chose pride instead of compassion. Every time I walked past someone hurting because I convinced myself it wasn't my responsibility. And I felt this whisper in my heart, a whisper I couldn't ignore. Fix your heart. Fix your character. Fix your intentions. Because one day you too will return. And that whisper didn't scare me. It centered me. It eased something in me. It made me want to live with intention before I meet the one who sees everything inside me. Suddenly, I started seeing life differently. We chase money like it can buy eternity. We chase status like it writes our destiny. We chase validation like it will matter when the earth is thrown over us. But Islam teaches something profoundly different. It teaches that what you give outlasts what you earn, that what you heal outlasts what you build, that who you are outlasts what you own. And the more I learned, the more these simple truths hit me like waves. A man once said, "The grave is too small for your ego." And that line punched me in the gut because it's true. All this noise we create, the arguments, the competition, the jealousy, the comparisons, none of it follows us to the other side. Only our kindness follows, our sincerity follows, our good deeds follow. I realized something profound. This world trains your hands. The next world reveals your heart. We spend years building a life, but only moments entering eternity. Death is not the enemy. A wasted life is. And now, when I think about death, I don't feel that cold fear anymore. I feel a gentle reminder, a tap on the shoulder, a soft voice whispering, live with purpose, love with sincerity, walk lightly, return beautifully. I'm not a Muslim, but I will tell you this with full sincerity. There is a wisdom in Islam that flows like water, soft enough to soothe, yet strong enough to carve through the hardest parts of the human heart. And that story, that one moment, that teaching about returning, it humbled me in a way I didn't know I needed. It made me grateful. It made me curious. It made me more aware of the temporary nature of every breath I take. And somewhere in that awareness, I found something that felt like peace. Not a loud peace, not a dramatic one, a quiet peace. The kind that sits with you in silence. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. The kind that makes you breathe deeper without even realizing it. I look at people differently now. I see how fragile we are, how temporary we all are, how every person is carrying stories you can't see. And I remind myself, one day every single one of us will return. Not vanish, not disappear, not dissolve into nothing. Return. And I think about the ones I've lost, the moments I grieved, the nights I cried for people I loved, and now I imagine them not lost, but home. I imagine them embraced, received, welcomed, and something in me finally feels at ease. Life is short, yes. Pain is inevitable, yes. But there is a beauty in knowing that this story, this messy, complicated, confusing human story, is not all there is. There is continuation beyond the curtain. There is meaning behind the mystery. There is mercy behind the fear. So I try to live now with more softness, more patience, more compassion, because if we are all souls on a short journey, if we are all travelers heading toward the same return, then kindness is not optional. It's essential. It's the only luggage that really matters on the day we go back. And when my time comes, I pray I return with a heart that learned how to be gentle, a heart that learned how to be grateful, a heart that learned how to be honest with itself, a heart that didn't waste the time it was given. Because in the end, we're all just souls temporarily housed in bodies, walking through a world that wasn't meant to be permanent. We enter with nothing, we leave with nothing, except the story we wrote with our character. And that's the story that meets us on the other side. And maybe that's what I was meant to learn from that one heartbreaking story about death in Islam, that life is brief, that love is sacred, that the soul is eternal, and that returning isn't something to fear. It's something to prepare for, something to honor, something to understand. And so I move through my days now with a different kind of awareness, a quieter awareness, the kind that listens more, feels more, appreciates more, the kind that remembers that every person I meet is fighting a battle between the temporary and the eternal. I remind myself not to rush so much, not to cling so tightly, not to take so lightly the moments that actually matter, because time is not guaranteed, but return is. And one day, when my name is called, I hope I walk into that next world with a heart that tried its best, a heart that forgave, a heart that loved, a heart that softened, a heart that learned, because after all the noise dies down, after the stories end, after the last breath leaves the body, nothing matters more than the state of the soul that returns. And when that moment comes for me, I just hope I return with peace. The same peace that this one Islamic story gently placed inside my heart. Because in the end, we're all just souls trying to find our way back home.